The wind moved slow over the wide plain that morning, carrying dust and the smell of dry grass toward a lonely ranch house. Inside, the widowed rancher, Samuel Reed, poured himself black coffee and looked out the window. The fence line was half broken again, and one of the barns needed a new door. The ranch had once been full of noise. Horses snorting, laughter, his wife humming. But now it was quiet except for the wind that scraped across the boards. He worked alone most days, speaking little to anyone. The nearest town was 20 miles away, and he only went there for supplies once every 2 weeks. He still kept her chair at the table, though no one sat in it. Sometimes he'd forget and set a second plate, then stop halfway and shake his head. Years had passed since the fever took her, but some habits refused to die. People said he'd turned into stone after she was gone. Maybe they were right. The land needed a man made of stone to last through drought and loneliness. That afternoon, while fixing a corral post, he saw a small shape moving down the road. A wagon wheel creaked, then broke apart. The shape stumbled forward and stopped near the gate. It was a young woman, no older than 20, wearing a torn dress and carrying a worn-out bag. She looked tired enough to fall over. Samuel stayed still for a while, leaning on his hammer. Strangers were rare out here, and sometimes trouble came wearing a kind face. But something in her step, slow, careful, not sneaky, made him walk toward the gate instead of back to the house. She lifted her head when she heard his boots on the gravel. Her eyes were brown and heavy with exhaustion. "Sir," she said softly, "I mean no harm. My name's Clara. I was heading west with a wagon train, but they left me behind when I got sick. I don't have any money. If I cook and clean, can I stay for a few days till I figure where to go?" Samuel didn't answer at once. He watched her fingers clutch the gate rail, white with cold and hunger. He had food enough for 2, though he rarely cooked more than he could eat. He also had memories. The last person he'd let in was the doctor who couldn't save his wife. He rubbed his chin, thinking. "You can rest in the barn," he said finally. "There's hay and water." Clara nodded quickly, as if afraid he might change his mind. She thanked him and walked to the barn. He went back to the fence, pretending not to watch. But he saw how she spread her coat on the hay and sat very still, like someone trying not to be a burden on the air itself. That night, the wind turned cold. He lit a fire and heard a faint cough outside. With a sigh, he took a blanket and a plate of stew to the barn. She was sitting near the horse stall, shivering. When he handed her the food, she looked up, startled. "I don't want to steal your supper," she said. "You're not stealing," he replied. "Eat before it gets cold." She ate quietly, murmuring thanks. He noticed she had small scars on her hands, the kind you get from years of work. He asked where she came from. "Missouri," she said between bites. "My pa died 2 winters back. Ma tried to keep the farm, but the bank took it. I was heading west to find work. I thought maybe California, maybe a school in one of the towns would need help. Guess the trail didn't like me much." He nodded. He'd seen too many dreams left in the dirt out here. Before leaving, he placed the extra blanket near her feet. "Sleep. You can help with chores tomorrow if you still want to earn your keep." The next morning, he found the kitchen already alive. The smell of biscuits and coffee filled the air. Clara stood by the stove, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, moving like she'd cooked there all her life. She turned when she heard him enter, nervous. "I hope it's all right," she said quickly. "I saw the flour and thought—" He raised a hand. "Smells better than anything I've made in months." She smiled then, just a little. Over breakfast, she told him she'd grown up cooking for 6 brothers, so a ranch meal was easy. He told her about the herd, the dry river, and how the town folk still owed him for last season's hay. They spoke carefully, like strangers trying to build a bridge from opposite banks of the same river. Days turned into a quiet rhythm. Clara washed clothes, cooked meals, and sang softly while sweeping the porch. Samuel fixed fences, worked the horses, and sometimes paused to listen. It had been years since laughter floated in that house. The first time she laughed, really laughed, was when one of the calves ran through the kitchen door chasing its own tail. Samuel tried to scold it, but she laughed so hard that even he had to grin. That evening, they sat outside watching the sunset paint the hills gold. The silence between them felt easy, not heavy like before. "You don't talk much," she said. "Not much to say," he replied. "You've got a lot to say," she answered softly. "You just forgot how." Her words caught him off guard. He looked at her, at the way the last light touched her hair, and for the first time in years he felt something break through the hard shell around his heart. But he said nothing. He only nodded, slow and thoughtful. As the week passed, the ranch began to look alive again. She cleaned windows that had turned gray with dust, washed curtains, and planted small flowers by the porch. Samuel didn't stop her. In truth, he liked it. The colors, the movement, the signs of care. Neighbors who passed by for trade noticed it too. "You finally hired help?" one asked. "Something like that," Samuel said, and left it there. One evening, storm clouds rolled in. Rain began to beat against the roof, hard and wild. Samuel went out to check the barn doors. Lightning flashed across the plain. In the doorway, Clara stood holding a lantern. "I thought you might need light," she said. He took the lantern, their fingers brushing for just a second. A warm second in the cold rain. They secured the doors together, laughing as the wind tried to shove them. When they ran back inside, dripping wet, she handed him a towel and shook her head. "You'd freeze yourself to death if I wasn't here," she teased. He smiled, rare and quiet. "Maybe so." Later, sitting by the fire, she stared at the flames. "When the storm passes, I should move on," she said softly. "You've done enough for me. I don't want to be a burden." Samuel looked at her, the firelight touching her tired face. "You've kept this place standing better than I have in years," he said. "You're no burden," she hesitated. "Then can I stay a bit longer? Maybe through the harvest?" He nodded once. "If you cook and clean," he said, repeating her own words with a faint smile, "then you can stay." That night she smiled for real, the kind that reached her eyes. She went to her small room near the kitchen, and he sat at the table long after she was gone. The house felt different, warmer somehow. Outside, the storm eased, leaving the air clean and the land quiet again. Over the next few weeks, Clara learned the rhythm of the ranch as if it were her own heartbeat. She rode into town with him once for supplies, sitting beside him on the wagon seat. People looked and whispered, the silent widower with a young woman by his side, but neither of them cared. When she smiled at the children playing near the well, Samuel saw how gentle she truly was. At night, he sometimes heard her humming the same tune his wife used to sing while cooking. It didn't hurt the way he thought it would. It felt like the house was remembering happiness again. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived from the sheriff's office in the next county. It was addressed to a Miss Clara Holt. She froze when she saw it. Her hands trembled as she read. Samuel waited but didn't press. Later, she said quietly, "They found someone who knows me, a relative in Texas. They offered me a place there. It's the chance I was looking for when I came west." He tried to smile. "Then that's good news." "Yes," she said, though her voice wasn't sure. "But I don't know if I want to leave yet." The wind rose again outside, stirring the curtains. She looked around the room, at the old chair, the fire, the boots by the door, and her eyes softened. "This place," she whispered, "it feels like home." Samuel didn't answer. He simply pulled up a chair across from her, the same chair that had sat empty for years. For a long time, neither spoke. The ranch creaked quietly around them, and somewhere outside, a horse stamped its hoof, he finally said. "Then stay till you know for sure." She nodded, and for the first time since the day she arrived, he saw peace settle in her face. Not the desperate kind that hides behind smiles, but the gentle peace of someone who's safe. The fire burned lower, throwing soft light across the table where two plates now sat instead of one. The widowed rancher stared into the flames, knowing the second part of his life had begun quietly, without fanfare. Just a tired girl, a question, and the sound of a chair being pulled up in answer. The days after the letter came were quieter than before. The ranch seemed to wait, as if listening for Clara's decision. She still cooked every morning, baked bread and cleaned the porch, but her eyes often turned toward the distant road that led south. Samuel noticed, though he said nothing. He had learned not to hold too tightly to what didn't belong to him. Still, something inside him hoped she would stay a little longer. One afternoon, he found her standing near the fence, staring out toward the horizon. The sun hung low and the sky burned with orange light. She looked thoughtful, her dress moving in the warm wind. He stopped beside her. "You've been thinking about that letter," he said quietly. She nodded. "It's from my aunt. She runs a boarding house near Fort Worth. She said she'd take me in, give me work. It's more than I could hope for." "But?" he asked. She smiled a little, her eyes still on the horizon. but this place feels like it's part of me now. I wake up to the sound of the wind and the horses, and I feel safe here. It's strange, isn't it? Not strange, he said. Just rare. That night, the sky filled with stars, clear and wide as a dream. Clara sat on the porch steps with a cup of tea. Samuel joined her, carrying a blanket. They talked about small things in air, how the crops might come in, how the horses were growing restless. Then she asked, "Do you ever think about leaving here?" He shook his head. "This land's all I've got left. I buried my wife here. Every fence post, every tree means something." Clara looked down, her fingers tightening around the cup. "I think I understand. When you lose everything, you start holding on to the small things that stay." The next morning, Samuel rode into town for supplies. When he returned, he saw smoke rising from the barn. He dropped the reins and ran. Inside, a small fire had started from an overturned lantern. Clara was already there, throwing water from a bucket. He grabbed another and helped until the flames hissed and died. When the air cleared, she coughed and wiped soot from her face. "You all right?" he asked, breathless. She nodded. "Just careless. I knocked it over while feeding the horse." He looked around the blackened boards, then at her hands, raw and red from heat. "You did well," he said. "Could have been worse." She laughed weakly. "You mean could have lost the barn?" He shook his head. "Could have lost you." Her smile faded a little. For a long second, they just looked at each other. The barn smelled of smoke and rain. Then she turned away, pretending to brush dust from her skirt. "It's all right," she said softly. "Nothing's lost." The next few days passed with a strange calm. Samuel worked harder than ever, fixing what the fire had damaged. Clara helped without complaint, wrapping her burned hands in cloth and still baking, sweeping, mending. Every night she sang quietly while washing dishes. Her voice drifted through the house, soft and peaceful. He found himself waiting for that sound. One evening, a wagon stopped by the gate. It carried a man wearing a gray coat and hat. Samuel walked out to meet him. "Afternoon," the stranger said. "Name's Carter Holt. I'm looking for my niece, and Clara Holt. Sheriff said she might be here." Samuel's stomach tightened. He nodded toward the porch where Clara had stepped out, eyes wide. "Uncle?" she whispered. The man smiled. "You got my letter, didn't you? I came to bring you home. Your aunt's worried sick." Samuel watched her face. She looked torn, joy and confusion mixing in her expression. She walked down the steps slowly. "I didn't expect you to come yourself. Couldn't let you travel alone again," Carter said kindly. "We've got room now. Things are better. You'll be safe." She looked back toward the house, the windows glowing with evening light, the porch she'd scrubbed, the flowers she'd planted. Then she looked at Samuel. He stood with his hat in his hands, quiet as always. Something heavy filled the air between them. That night she packed her small bag. The uncle would leave early at dawn. Samuel came to the doorway as she folded her shawl. "You don't have to explain," he said. "I want to," she answered. "When I came here, I thought I'd stay only a night. You gave me shelter, food, and kindness when you didn't have to. You gave me peace, Samuel." He nodded slowly. "You gave it back," she smiled, but tears shimmered in her eyes. "If I leave, it doesn't mean I forget. You taught me something. That kindness still exists even in lonely places." He wanted to speak, to tell her she didn't have to go, but the words stayed locked inside. He only said, "The door'll stay open if you ever need it again." Before sunrise, she climbed onto the wagon. Her uncle thanked Samuel for his help. The horses started moving, wheels crunching over dry earth. Samuel stood by the fence watching until the wagon became a dot in the distance. The land felt empty again, but this time the silence hurt in a different way. Not because it was lonely, but because it had once been full. Days passed, then weeks. Samuel went back to his work, though the chores seemed slower now. The flowers by the porch began to fade, but he watered them anyway. Her old cup still sat on the shelf, and sometimes he caught himself setting 2 plates out of habit. The house didn't echo anymore. It breathed. One windy afternoon, he found a letter tucked under the door. It was written in careful handwriting. "Dear Samuel, I reached Fort Worth safely. My aunt and uncle have been kind, and the work is steady. But I think of the ranch every day. The way the air smelled after rain, the sound of your boots on the porch, the firelight on the walls. I hope you're well. Please take care of the land and of yourself. Clara." He read it twice, then placed it on the table beside his wife's old photograph. For the first time in years, he spoke aloud to the empty room. "She's doing fine," he said softly, as if telling his late wife. "You'd have liked her." Time moved like it always did on the plains, and slow but steady. The seasons changed and the ranch kept breathing. Then one evening near autumn, Samuel was mending a gate when he heard a familiar voice. "Need a hand, Mr. Reed?" He turned sharply. Clara stood there by the fence, dusty from travel but smiling wide. Her clothes were cleaner, her eyes brighter. She held her small bag and a letter in her hand. "I came back," she said. "My aunt's place was fine, but it wasn't home." I realized I already had one. Samuel stared for a moment, unsure what to say. The air between them carried the soft smell of hay and sunset. Finally, he let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Still plan to cook and clean for your keep?" She grinned. "If you'll have me." He nodded. "Then you'd better start with supper. The stove's been lonely." She laughed, brushing a tear from her cheek, and walked past him toward the porch. Inside, she set her bag down in the same corner it had been before. Samuel followed her into the kitchen, watching as she opened the cupboard and pulled out the pan she used to favor. It was as if no time had passed. That night after supper, they sat outside again under the same stars. The wind was gentle and the horses settled in the barn. "I almost didn't come back," she said quietly. "But then I remembered what you said, that the door would stay open. I guess I needed to see if it really was." He looked at her, eyes soft. "It always was." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night. Then she said almost shyly, "You still keep that chair empty?" He glanced at the chair beside him, the one that had belonged to his wife. "Yeah," he murmured. "Maybe it's time someone sat in it again," Clara whispered. Samuel looked at her, the firelight flickering across her face. Slowly, he reached over and pulled the chair closer to the table. "Then sit," he said simply. She did. The sound of the chair legs sliding over the wood filled the quiet air, small but certain. The ranch wasn't silent anymore. In the following days, their work became shared. Two people finding rhythm in the dust and sunlight. She sang while cooking. He told her stories about the land, about the cattle drives and the storms that once scared him. They laughed more than either expected. When neighbors stopped by, they saw something new in Samuel. The weight had lifted from his shoulders. He spoke more, smiled easier. They said the ranch finally felt alive again. One evening, Clara brought 2 cups of coffee to the porch. Samuel took one and they watched the horizon where the sun melted into gold. "Do you ever wonder why I came that first day?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Maybe the land brought you. It has a way of calling those who need it." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe someone up there decided you shouldn't eat burned biscuits anymore." He laughed, the sound deep and warm. The stars came out one by one, bright and endless. The ranch stood quiet, wrapped in peace. For the first time since his wife's passing, Samuel felt whole, not because he'd forgotten, but because someone had helped him remember how to live again. The wind whispered through the grass as he looked at Clara. "You're home now," he said softly. She smiled, her eyes shining in the starlight. "Yes," she whispered. "Home." And from that night on, the old ranch wasn't lonely anymore. Just 2 hearts finding comfort in the same place under the same wide western sky.